Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we're looking at our first sort of Worlds deck, and it's going to be Yveltal Bats, which is a pretty interesting one. The concept being we want to have a favourable Night March, which is something a lot of people are going to be looking to do, as well as having good typing and good answers against the two main item lockers that we're going to expect, and that's going to be Trevenant, and it's also going to be Vespiquen Vileplume. I feel these two will be the more popular item locks because the Aquabox deck does suffer at the hands of Pokemon Ranger. That's not to say Seismitoad is going to be non-existent, but we think the more popular archetypes in terms of item lock are going to be Trev and Vespivile. So I'm going to talk about why we've made certain inclusions and decisions in this list to deal with those sort of three matchups that we've got in mind and look at how the deck's been built going forward. So let's jump into the list. First of all, we're playing a 2-2 split of the non-EX Yveltal, and this is a rare split. It's most often a 3-3, but you'll see that we've made a few decisions later on in the list that sort of make this work out a little bit better. So both offer so much. Against Night March, this guy is the go-to option. Oblivion Wing does the 30 damage for a single Dark Energy, and obviously we hit for weakness on Pumpkaboo, so that's the 60, and the 30 for the Joltix. We have 3 Muscle Band in this list, so we can even deal with Mew quite effectively. Muscle Band also means that we can one-hit KO Pumpkaboo even with fighting Fury Belt. So really it's only Fury Belted Mews and Joltix that can survive Oblivion Wings. So essentially this guy's always hitting 1-for-1 against Night March, which is a pretty good start. It forces them to keep getting resources going and keep getting Night Marches every turn. Force them to deal with a bunch of non-EXs, just forces more resources out of them, which is pretty good for us. So then we have the 2 Fright Knight Yveltal. Why is it so important to have this guy as a 2? Well, this guy is probably the better option against Trevenant, and it's also the better option against Vespiquen Vileplume. With Fright Knight, we can catch things even with Floatstone if you're up against the Vespivile players, so it forces their AZs. We know that the Zygarde build plays like 4 AZ, but even then we have like resistance, so it's pretty good matchup that way anyway. But the builds with just Vespiquen Vile, they're playing normally just 1 AZ, sometimes 2. So forcing Lysander plus Fright Knight can be so big for trapping Vileplumes, which is really good, and then you go for the stall approach to try and win. And the ability is also helpful against the bursting balloons that Trevenant has, and our damage output is just nicer. Doing the 60 goes to 120, which is pretty handy, as well as getting the 60 damage snipes onto Shaymin EXs in broader matchups to try and improve our prize trade. It's also a great option for when we are up against Night March. Throw it in the active just to shut off tools, so if these Oblivion Wings have been working, but they do have Fury Belts on, you can send this guy up just to take the knockout for the turn and then carry on with your turn, maybe get the attack off with him, or maybe pivot into something else. So yeah, really, really nice card. Its attack is great, especially in this build because we are playing Bats and we're playing 1 Yveltal Break as well, which I'll get onto in a moment. So that sniping really, really is relevant. These 2 cards are some of my favourite cards in the format now, and I couldn't choose a 3-1 split. I think it's safer to have a 3-1 split, but at the moment I'm loving Fright Knight so much in a more broad spectrum that I felt 2-2 was correct, and we sort of make up for it, the fact that we only have 2 of these guys, with some other attackers later on, so don't worry, carry on and watch this video. We are playing 1 Yveltal Break as well. We feel 1 is probably the correct count. We tried a 2 count with like lots of max elixirs, but we're expecting too much item lock for that sort of strategy to really pay off in day 1 of Worlds, so just the 1 in here. He just offers some more firepower against EX matchups that we're not expecting many of, which is why we're only playing the 1, but we're still expecting to hit a few matchups throughout the days. So 3 Dark Energy does 120 damage and also 30 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon with any damage counters already on them. So that really does nicely with Pitch Black Spear, and we have Bats to try and get multiple snipes around the board, which is great. That 120 is a great baseline as well, knocking out Shaymin EXs, and we're also just putting good numbers on with stuff like Muscle Band. We go to 140, so then our own snipe, if we're able to gust something out the way with the likes of Lysander or Escape Rope that we are playing in here, we can sometimes take 3 or 4 prizes in a turn if we're able to use this guy like twice, which is pretty cool. We also get the buff of 150 HP, which is pretty okay. It can be annoying for certain decks, but not too many. But in general, just a really nice option. It's going to be one of these things where there's certain matchups where he's absolutely dead, and you can just like compress this guy away because you know you're never going to use him. But in certain matchups as well, he's also going to be a real key player that you use once or twice, which is really, really nice for you. So next up is going to be one Yveltal EX. Me and Jack had a big discussion about this card, whether or not we should be playing it. And it's pretty bizarre to think that this is one of the most powerful EXs we have in the game right now, and we still had to sit down and have a real debate whether it was worth the slot, because we are so paranoid about Night March. Having anything in your list that has the 2 letters EX in it makes you so much worse these days, because they can just target whistle over and over, and they can even try and use Captivating Pokepuff to take this out of the hand and put it into play, which is really, really awkward for us. So we have to be really on our toes against Night March, have to be very conservative, know when we're Lysandering this guy away, Sycamoring him away, stuff like that, Ultra Balling him away. It can be awkward. It sets your opponent up to make plays, which is never cool for you. But again, it's one of these things where against the Trevenant players, against the Vespiquen Vileplume players, this guy is the kingpin. He's amazing. He has a huge HP for Trevenant players to get over, as well as you hitting amazing numbers, and it's a similar story for Vespi-Vile. So we think he's worth the single copy. Still very, very handy. And again, in these broader matchups against other EX decks, which we are still expecting a handful of, he's still just absolutely fantastic. Next up, the reason why I feel comfortable with the 2-2 split. We're playing 2 Mew in here, and it's weird to think that we're playing Mew and we're not playing D-Valley in this list. We're using this just to be basically more of these guys in the matchups where you need more of these guys, and then more snipers when we need to snipe. It's just a really cool card to have in the deck. It's a free retreat pivot, which is really nice for this deck because all the Yveltals have a chunky 2 retreat cost, even the EX. So having a nice free retreater is a huge deal, just to pivot in and out of. Gives us more flexibility to play out our entire turn and then make the decisions once we've played out our hand and such, which is really helpful. It also means that we can like comfortably protect a Yveltal on the bench. While we attack with this Mew, set one up on the bench, we're way more likely to break evolve the benched one because it's healthy and safe. Whereas if it was just Yveltals, this one sort of attacks, then you have to consider whether you break which one. Just having the extra flexibility, the free retreat, so many reasons why the Mew is really nice. But basically it allows us to cheat more copies of these Yveltals into play, which is pretty important because we're limited to a number of copies with the same name of a card. So Mew sort of cheats its way into doing that for us. Additionally, against Night March, because they're always going to be playing D-Valley anyway, you can just let them have D-Valley, because then you can have Pitch Black Spear for just 2 Dark Energy, and that's just bonkers. If you can get multiple Dark Spears off in a game, Pitch Black Spears, it's just insane against Night March. You just win races, even without the help of Bats, which we're already playing a lot of. So the 2 Mew in here, really, really cool inclusion. It forces more Hex Maniacs from people, sure. Makes us a bit more weak against Garbodor builds, but I feel like against the Garbo builds, these guys, sort of a 2-2 of each is enough. Think about Darkrai, Darkrai Garb with Giratina. You're never going to need more than 2 copies in that matchup anyway, so you're not really too bothered. You can just use Mew as basically a blank slate that has free retreat. That's all you really need it for in those matchups. So it makes you a little bit weaker to Hex, which people will try and do because we're playing Bats. But other than that, it allows us just more copies of both Yveltal because I couldn't decide which one we needed a thicker line of. I feel like if we were going to have a 3-1 split, I really miss the ability more on this guy, so having the 2 physical copies is more important. So yeah, 2 Mew. I think it's a really nice way of cheating our way to having more copies, which is really, really cool to get plenty of attacks off and really have enough firepower throughout the game. Following on from that, we do have the element of the Bats in the list. We're playing a 3-3-3 line of Crobat in this list. With the idea that we want to beat out the Night March players quite simply. The decks like Manectric Bats and even to an extent Lucario Bats, they try to counteract Night March by having these guys to have a favourable prize trade. And pretty simply we're doing the same thing here. We can use these snipes, especially because we don't care about Fury Belt at all. We've got 2 Fright Knights, oftentimes they're just going to be shut down, we don't even care. Joltik is always going to have that 30 HP. Pumpkaboo is always going to have that 60, so we're always getting over them with these Bats. We really punish the low HP Pokemon that they play, and basically it forces Hex Maniacs at the very least. Just sitting with a Golbat in play forces these awkward plays, forces them to Lysander around our attackers, which means we have another one for the following turn, and they have to Hex sometimes as well. And if they're doing Lysander and Hex Maniac, it means they're not drawing cards with stuff like Sycamore, and it means they're not getting teammates value. And this just means that they have, oftentimes a half-baked setup. Sometimes they miss a turn. They're not as sort of deadly as they can be. They can't get wombo combos off because they're simply not drawing enough cards when they have to spend their supporter on something that can't draw them cards for the turn, which is really, really nice. So it's a great deterrent for Night March, if nothing else. It's really, really strong in here. I think the 3-3-3 count is very important as well. Oftentimes I've had 3-3-2, but you just need to have access. On that one turn that they can't hex you, you need to punish them instantly. So you've got to have the higher count, in my opinion. So yeah, 3-3-3 is the right number right now, I believe. It's not great against the likes of Trevenant and Vespival. They are kind of clunky dead cards, which is something to be concerned about, because that is a lot of cards to have clunk, 9 cards. But in sort of EX matchups, it's still really handy. It makes the Pitch Black Spear like so much more dangerous. It makes the Yveltal Break really dangerous, and it's just a big damage increase. And when we're trying to slog like 2-hit KOs against other things, so the bats really do offer a lot. The only concern is against the item lock decks. It's quite a few dead cards to have. Then we're just finishing off with 2 Shaymin EX. Like I was saying, 2 is the sort of lower side. Often decks are playing 3, but it's just those 2 letters EX that puts me off these days, because Night March is just going to punish it so hard. So I think 2 is probably the correct count. Also, we want to have bench space for like bats and Mews as well. So I think 2 is probably the right option for this deck. So that will round out the Pokemon. I believe it's 19. Onto the items now. We do have 1 Sacred Ash. Sacred Ash is another way that we can recycle these Yveltals. We need to keep getting Oblivion Wing over and over again against the Night Marchers, and against other stuff we need to recycle our EX, and we need to recycle our Break against the other EX decks so that we have enough firepower to keep up. We are playing 1 Escape Rope. I mentioned it earlier, how it can combo really nicely with our one-of Yveltal Break, also combos nicely with just Pitch Black Spear in general. So really, really nice. The gusting effect is just awkward for so many different things, for so many reasons. Obviously they can't get Floatstone to get like free retreaters around their board because we have Fright Knight potentially quite often, so Escape Rope can be very disruptive, and it can also help us out with prizes because nothing's really safe when we have bats in the mix and we have so many snipers in here. So really, really cool. Additionally, we're not playing Ranger, so it's an out to the likes of Jolteon. Although our list is already horrible against Jolteon EX. Everything's weak to Lightning. We have no sort of coverage at all against the Lightning decks. My only reasoning being that I'm not expecting much Manectric, and that's the main deck that plays Jolteon right now because of the popularity of Ranger. It would mean that they basically never beat Night March, so that's sort of them falling at the first hurdle really, and I don't expect many people to be piloting Manectric on the day. We are playing 1 Battle Compressor. It's just a nice declunk card. We have a few one-ofs supporter-wise that we want to move into the discard pile. Also, it gets value for Oblivion Wing to get that acceleration going. So just a one-off. I've debated having 2 in here. Had to take it out for that second Mew. I feel like it is worth it, but right now, just the 1 does it for me. Finally, for one-offs, we're playing a Level Ball. Level Ball gets insane value when trying to spam the bats as quickly as possible. But additionally, it can be great for grabbing Mew, which is like any attacker you need at the situation, which is pretty cool. So just getting access to these cards is pretty important. Following on, we just have the consistency cards. We have 3 Trainer's Mail, followed up with 4 VS Seeker and 4 Ultra Ball. None of these should be real surprises. I shouldn't have to go over these too much. Then we do have the 3 Muscle Band as well. We're playing just Muscle Band in this list. It's the only tool that we're playing. Obviously, Fright Knight would shut off the likes of Floatstone, so we don't really want to play those. We have other means, like we have the Escape Rope and we're playing AZ as well, so additionally we have a lot of just free retreaters inherently, so that's not too big of an issue. Just the Muscle Band. We don't want the Fighting Fury Belts because I don't think it does enough in this list. We just want the raw output because naturally our output isn't too high. Just the 30 base from our early attacker. Obviously Pitch Black Spear isn't affected, so we never need it for the Muscle Band. The Muscle Band math is way better than Fury Belt math for this guy in particular. It means that we can one-hit KO Shaymin EXs with Y Cyclone. Just numbers are so much nicer when you incorporate Muscle Band. It's one of the reasons why Manectric bats use Muscle Band in high counts. Sometimes they even played 4, but that was when Hedring was much more popular, so do bear that in mind. But I think 3 is definitely the correct count so that we're not just prodding. Sometimes we can deal with lower HP Pokemon as well. Think about the likes of Greninja and Quad Zoroark with Muscle Band and Reverse Valley, of which we play 2 in this list, which I'll get onto in a moment. It means we can also start threatening these lower HP Pokemon in certain circumstances, which is also pretty handy for getting early aggression, because against those decks we need to be taking prizes as quickly as possible if we want to keep up in the races. On to supporters, we're playing one Xerosic. Our weakness to Garbodor, with the reliance on Mew and the reliance on Bats, is kind of, you know, it's a factor that you have to take into consideration. So Xerosic's there. Also, it's going to get rid of Fury Belts on a whole different bunch of attackers, so that's important. And I guess in like mirror matches against other Yveltal decks, getting rid of DCEs can sometimes be a huge deal. We are playing the one Hex. Hex is going to be fantastic for the likes of Metal Box, and Greninja as well is pretty huge. Even Zoro builds, Quad Zoro, really, you know, they really need stand-in sometimes. So Hex can be nice in certain situations, just randomly. Obviously in early turns as well, it can be huge. It can break the lock of Vileplume. It can break the lock for Trev. So all of these factors are worth noting for the one Hex. We're playing the one AZ. AZ is obviously a moving card for us, for our chunky retreaters. Everything named Yveltal has a 2 retreat cost. It can also respam our Bats, which is also pretty important. And it can pick up Shaman after getting value, so it's no longer a target on the bench, which is also pretty useful. Following on from that, we're having the slightly higher count of 2 Lysander. I think it's important because we're taking knockouts from all over the place. We can set up knockouts with our Bats quite nicely, and the amount of sniping that we have. We can really take advantage with Lysander. Additionally, we like the 2 count combined with the 2 Fright Knight, so we can have good disruptive options against the Vileplume players as well. So I believe 2 Lysander is the correct count in this list. Following on, we are playing 2 N. N's another great card that's going to keep us alive against Night March, force them to miss getting that Hex Maniac, force them to just miss pieces of getting frequent attackers, because every turn we're going to try and put pressure, try and get at least 1 knockout every turn against the Night March. So incorporate N so that they can't draw everything that they need the following turn, and pretty much cross your fingers and hope for the best. Following on, just for Professor Sycamore, pretty simple stuff, still aggressive, consistent, all of that good stuff. Also gets Darks in the discard pile for our Oblivion Wings, which is pretty cool. There is the earlier mentioned 2 Reverse Valley. I think we definitely don't need to play Dimension Valley, even though we are reliant on Mew and we have Crobat, so there's a few things that can get value, but other decks are playing Dimension Valley in such high counts that we don't need to play it ourselves. We can just sort of let our opponent keep them in play in certain situations. Like against Trevenant, we want to be attacking with the dark stuff anyway, so Mew's not that important in the first place, unless we want to use Encounter just to find like our 1 Yveltal EX and then we get going, which is kind of cool. But then against like Night March, we can just let that sit in play and get cheaper attacks off with Mew, and we can use the Crobats for free, which is pretty cool. But in other matchups where we need just the +10, like I was saying, against Greninja, we want to firstly just bounce the stadium. This could be anything. We just want to bounce other people's stadiums to force them to have more resources. It just so happens that Reverse Valley can be helpful to us. There's a debate whether or not to play Parallel City as another means of getting rid of our EXs so that we can't be whistled and stuff like that, or Poker Puffed. I could see a 1-1 split, but right now I just like the raw damage. We don't do too much as a baseline, so we've got to have as many increases as possible. So we are playing 2 Reverse Valley in here. Finally, for energy, just 2 double colorless. We are playing only the 1 Yveltal EX and only the 2, well, the 2 Fright Knight, I guess, but I believe 2 is the correct count. It also means that we can sometimes get Sky Returns. Trying to Sky Return into a Fright Knight is a great thing to do against Night March whenever they're going Joltik. Oftentimes they will in this matchup because we have so many things that are lightning weak, so bear that in mind. We can sometimes punish those sorts of plays. Even with just the 2 count, I believe it's totally enough. And then finishing off with just 8 Dark. 8 Dark is pretty standard, to be honest. It's slightly on the higher side than normal because I just want to have access to it, especially because we have the 1 Yveltal break in here. We want to have plenty of actual Dark energy because he is all Dark cost. He has no colorless in his attack cost, which is a bit annoying, but it sort of forces us to have the higher count of Darks. It means that we're never going to miss them out as well against the item knockers. We're going to consistently have energy to attach and keep attacking. So these are factors that we need to bear in mind for Worlds. So that is the list, guys. Yveltal Bats, who knows if it can really be a top contender. I think the list I've got right now is trying to have answers to Night March, definitely, but also have some answers to the item knockers to give us certain ways and certain lines of victory. So let me know what you guys think about this list. and if you think it could show up for Worlds. I know there's other dark lists that I'm going to be profiling as well soon. I know the Quad Zoroark with Pokepuff is one a lot of people want to see. There's a lot of hype around that deck. I too am a big fan as well. I've got that list ready for you guys. It'll be coming out next week. I think also this weekend Jack will be putting up his first Worlds video, which is going to be cool. I'll be doing Night March as well next week, so plenty to enjoy. Put comments down below if you want to see certain decks before Worlds. We're going to try and cross off as many as the list as possible. We've got plenty written out already, and it's just a matter of getting them uploaded and stuff like that, whilst giving you guys a couple of days to sort of compress what you've just seen and go out and test them for yourselves. So do like this video if you did. Leave your comments down below on what you want to see next, what you thought about this list, and maybe some other inclusions, whatever else, what you think about the Worlds format. It's going to be a lot of fun. Going to see you guys all there. It should be great. So for now, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I will see you guys next time.